Theology 223, Chapter 11, Presentation number 6. This is more specific regarding breakdowns in communication. So without further ado, let's get going. Players and coaches, that's not just a one-off relationship. It's an ongoing relationship that is kind of cultivated over time. And as a result, the player and the coach do become better acquainted with each other. And as a result, the communication, both verbal and nonverbal, becomes more fluid. There's a little bit of like this mutual understanding in terms of communication between the two parties. Now, I would say that when communication breaks down, it'd be kind of symptomatic. It could be symptomatic of any number of extrinsic or external factors or anything internal regarding the relationship. But that dyad between the athlete and the coach, it has its own little culture built in, and it has its own set of norms. It has its own set of communication norms as well. And there are things outside of that working relationship that can cause challenges in communication. And so as a coach, you have to be humble enough to recognize that there are a lot of external factors, exogenous factors that can cause a breakdown in communication. Instead of being like, damn it, Jimmy, why aren't you listening to me? You have to be able to understand that it might not be Jimmy, it might be the coach. Maybe something's going on with the coach that they're having difficulty really delivering content in a way that Jimmy is accustomed to understanding. So I have said it a couple times, it's a two-way street where you have to be able to really kind of wrap yourself around this and be humble enough as a leader and a coach to be able to help resolve whatever that communication issue is. Now the book, they list that when breakdowns occur, they usually result of either the sender or the receiver. And I just kind of sat there for a moment and went, well, duh. I mean, what else would it be? It'd be two people in the equation. That's it. And in some regards, it could be the sender and then the receiver is a group or it's an entire team. But it became, when I read this, I was like, oh, yeah, okay, great. On to the next chapter, basically. And they kind of elaborate a little bit further, but I don't think we need to really spend a lot of time on this because I think the statement is really self-evident, but it doesn't really consider the environment. It really just takes into account the person who's sending the message or receiving the message. And there could be things within the context of where the message is sent or how it's sent that causes some of these issues. And in some regards, it comes down to inconsistent messaging, right? You have one message today for a certain type of behavior, you have a different one tomorrow for the same behavior, or you have one message for one athlete versus a different message for another athlete for the same behavior, probably even worse. So it could be content related, right? What you're delivering. It could be how you're delivering it. Is it more positive or negative? Is it supportive or is it feedback? Is it critical? And it could be nonverbal and verbal as well. And what happens is sometimes you'll have like the verbal and the nonverbal will not align in terms of you're offering feedback. And I made a joke about it in one of the other presentations. You're smiling while screaming at your athlete. You're probably a sociopath of some variety. But you have to have the verbal and the nonverbal cueing and communication all kind of fit together. Otherwise, you're sending inconsistent messages to your athletes, and that's just wrapping yourself right into a possibility of failure. So on the receiver side, they list several factors for this breakdown. And they list, that the athlete just might be misinterpreting the message. I'm used to receiving a message a certain way, and today, for whatever reason, I'm kind of processing it different, even though it's the same message. Could be any number of things going on with the athlete. Perhaps the message has become so overdone that I'm no longer actively listening to it anymore. It's just kind of this verbiage that continually comes out of my coach's mouth, and I tune it out until I have to tune back in. And the book lists like these three main levels of listening that you have to have, level 1, 2, 3. But the levels themselves are active listening, hearing the content only, and here's only part of the message. And I'm going to preface this by saying you can look at this from the athlete side or the coach side. And, level 1 is the active listening part, as we talked about before, where you have this dialogue, the person's actively engaged, they're listening to what you have to say, they're able to offer poignant and very logical responses to any questions you may have, and they might even be able to present some of their own questions in a dialogue with you as a coach. Level 2 refers to just hearing only. You're just kind of sitting there listening to the coach drone on. And usually the listener is kind of preoccupied with something else or just not interested across the board. And when you look at these two, level 2 and level 2 refers to hearing only the content of the message while listening. And with this, in level 3, the listener hears only part of the message. So I would say if you were to find this on a quiz somewhere else, or maybe on an exam somewhere else, you'll probably have to differentiate between level 2 and level 3, at least have an understanding that one of them is only part of the content, level 3, whereas level 2, you're hearing the content of the message, but you're not being actively involved in that at all. I like this. I like this a lot on 259. They talk about some of the barriers of communication. So the receiver is just not paying attention. They're prejudging. They have bias in the communication. They think their coach is stupid and they're not going to listen to them. Those are reasons why. I don't really believe in what my coach has to say. They've not really led us to a winning season thus far, so I've lost my trust in their ability to even coach, let alone lead, etc., etc., etc. So I like this in terms of how they have this listed out. I think it has its place and something you'll be able to look at on 259 and really kind of wrap yourself around. All right, guys, I'm breaking out. I'm going to the next presentation.